Okay, so there's just a couple of further things that I'd like to share with you to really increase your understanding of stress and sort of how it has an impact on us. And this is a very personal story. This is something I experienced firsthand. But a few years ago, I decided to run the marathon. Not so much because I wanted to run the marathon. More I wanted to have an understanding on how the human body is impacted by extended periods of stress, or when it's put under extreme challenge, how it copes with it. And also because I had a doctor that told me because of an injury I'd experienced playing football that I would never run long distances or play football again. So essentially I did it to prove him wrong. So I decided to run the marathon, and I've now done it 4 times over 6 years, and it took me a while, but I think I finally understood how to cope with a challenge like that without actually ending up feeling terrible for months afterwards. I'd like to share with you what I learned from that experience, if I may. So would it be okay if I just spoke to you a little bit about that? So the first thing I would ask you to do is I just want you to think about 2 different types of runners, because this will really help to put it into context. So firstly, I'd like you to think of a sprinter, your typical 100-meter sprinter. See someone like Dwayne Chambers, yeah? What kind of a body shape does a typical sprinter like Dwayne Chambers have?
You're very slim.
Not at all. Actually, completely opposite of that.
They're quite chunky, aren't they?
Yeah. So, yeah, not so much chunky, but they're very well built, defined, toned, muscular, huge hulks of men, very beefy, bulky men. We're talking about 100-meter sprinters, yeah, short distance runners. What kind of a state is their body when they're running a 100-meter sprint?
Every single muscle is working.
Yeah.
As much as it can.
Yeah. So tight, tense, veins bulging, muscles are pumped, teeth gritted, looks of determination on their faces, really, really pumped up. What's their breathing like? What would you imagine their breathing to be like?
Quick.
Quick? How long's a 100-meter sprint? Not in distance, in time.
I don't know.
The world record is about 9.5 seconds. So they don't actually take a breath. They hold their breath. And the reason they hold their breath, because taking a breath would slow them down. The breath requires time and energy. And anyone can hold their breath for 9.5 seconds. They take a breath before they start, and when they finish, what do you think the first thing they do?
Release their breath.
Yeah. So just like we do when we got, as we were talking about earlier, when we get onto the train, we've been running for the train, first thing we do, and now I can relax. That's what a sprinter would do at the end of a sprint. So let's park our sprinter friend over here. Let's think of someone that's completely at the pole reverse of our sprinter friend, a marathon runner, like Paula Radcliffe. Okay, she's a good example. What kind of a body does she have? What kind of a body shape does she have?
She's slim.
Yeah.
And strong.
Yeah, very, very slim. In fact, so slim with no meat on those bones. If she stood sideways, you wouldn't be able to see her. She's that skinny. And there's something in particular she does. If you've ever seen her on television, or if you've ever seen her running, there's something in particular she does that gives us an idea of what kind of a state her body's in. So do you know what it is that she does?
No.
Well, actually, even though you said no, you demonstrated to me exactly what she does, because when she runs, she kind of nods her head like this, or it'll flop backwards and forwards. So if you've ever seen her run, you'll see that her head is just literally flopping around all over the place like this. What's the reason do you think her head does that? When she's running, she's literally...
Because her legs need the energy. Maybe.
No. A lot more simple than that.
To relax?
Well, it's not so much to relax, is because she's relaxed. Because if you think about it, if I am running like this, my fists are clenched, my forehead's furrowed, my muscles are tense, that requires energy. Now, if you just did this for like 5 minutes, you'd feel tired at the end of that. If you did that for several hours, you're going to feel pretty drained. That's energy that could otherwise be used for running. So, I had a coach this time, and they trained me to keep to scan my body from the top of the head to the tip of my toes to ensure I'm not holding any tension in my body. And by keeping my body relaxed and fluid, I'm able to use all of that energy for running, not wasting it unnecessarily. So, you'll see that the most effective long distance runners actually look quite relaxed. They're running a marathon at a pretty good pace, but they look pretty relaxed, and there's no tension in their body, and their muscles are relatively loose. What do you imagine her breathing to be like?
Deep breaths.
Yeah.
Slow breaths.
Deep, slow belly breaths, maximise the amount of oxygen going into their body to help to fuel their run.
Mm.
Now, what would happen if we asked our sprinter friend over here to run a marathon?
They couldn't cope with it. They're not trained to do that.
Yeah. Chances are it probably causes them to have a heart attack eventually, because the strain it put on their heart, they're not trained, their bodies are not designed to actually do that kind of a long distance run. So I think that it's important for us to bear this in mind, because the sprinter is using stress constructively. They are purposely putting themselves into a state of stress because they know it's helping them to run that short distance race very effectively. But equally, you cannot put yourself into that state of high stress and tension and expect to stay in that for extended periods of time. It's not sustainable. And a lot of us fail to understand this. And that causes obviously challenges and problems in our life, because is life a sprint or a marathon? Is life 100 metres or is it a long distance race?
Combination.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It's a long distance race with a few short sprints along the way. Now this is what's really interesting. The sprinter cannot do a marathon. The marathon runner can do a sprint. The marathon runner can essentially, they'll be running the marathon and then they'll be jostling to take over another competitor, and they'll speed up, or then maybe they get to the last sort of quarter or half a mile and they'll speed up to get over the finish line. So, our marathon runner friend here is able to do a sprint. The sprinter is just not physically able to run a marathon. And besides the impact it would have on their heart and all those kind of things, the other thing to bear in mind is they can't hold their breath for that long, because that's what a sprinter does. They're holding their breath. They're not able to maintain that for extended periods of time. Now, if we are approaching life like a sprinter, that we've got this sustainable pace, if we're approaching life like a marathon runner and we have this sustainable pace that we can maintain, that we can basically use as our base state, and when something stressful happens or a challenge comes up, we break into a sprint, but we always come back to our sustainable pace, we are much more likely to get to our natural finish line and not end up like the sprinter and having a heart attack before we get to the end of our race. Because this is not a sustainable pace. You cannot get through life trying to sprint. But many people do. Many people try and get through their lives like a sprinter. And you will burn out, and you will get ill, or you'll have a heart attack, or you'll suffer some other horrible illness. And really what we are here to do is ensure that people are able to find their pace, to find the pace that they're able to sustain and maintain, and they get to their finish lines, and they do it happily and healthily. And when they do face a challenge, they're able to break into a sprint to overcome that, and then always come back to their sustainable pace. Yeah? Is that a useful analogy?
Yeah. Really useful. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
And I hope you found that useful, because I had to suffer a fair amount of pain and run a hell of a lot of marathons and a lot of training to come up with that story. So I hope you find that a useful analogy.
Thank you. Yeah.